Fantasy hockey GMs aiming for a winning squad don't have much time left to add some waiver wire options to your club that's taking you over the top, which is why on the latest edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, regardless of the schedule, we're taking a look at some of the players that you want to go out there and grab to make sure you're getting this paper. Let's get it, and let's tap in to all the hockey news you need.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Even though it's not Monday, waiver wire options are just as critical. We have a whole bunch to cover on the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, where new customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 wager hits. I am joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Roden. I'm intrigued to hear what you have to say about some waiver wire targets. Obviously, a lot going on in the world of hockey right now, Steele. And as much as you and I say this all the time, and it holds true, because look at me, not able to keep my finger on the pulse, and I'm way out of it. We'll have a listener league check-in later in the week so you guys know how both of our teams are faring. But teams right now, Steele, GMs that are succeeding, they know what's going on in the NHL. So there's waiver wire targets to be had. Over to you. I have a bunch. We won't have bets today, but we'll have it all covered the rest of the week. A lot of players out there, Steele, that I think are still severely under-owned. So who are you looking at and why? I've got a number of targets and honorable mentions. Let's get to it and help our listeners get to this finale.
Yeah, I got 7 players I want to talk about, and I'm not going to go in crazy in-depth on every single one of them, but I want to start off with 2 goaltenders, and you're going to hear a lot of names that Flip and I have talked about, obviously. Yes. We have to run through the cycle, especially when a lot of these players we've mentioned still don't go up in value or rostered percentage-wise. So I do want to start off with 2 goaltenders, because goaltenders are always a hot topic, always a hot commodity in fantasy leagues. And 2 that I am seeing that, in your words, are underappreciated, undervalued right now. It's your boy, Lucas Dostel, and the guys that I've had on my team almost the entire season, and that is Karel Vejmelka. So real quickly, Karel Vejmelka, he's rostered at 28% on Yahoo, 12% on ESPN. I think he's a goaltender who definitely goes underappreciated. He's been the better goaltender in Utah between him and Connor Ingram, and I know Ingram's been hurt. He has a .909 save percentage, a .257, a 2.57 goals against average. He's given the Utah Hockey Club the ability to fight for a playoff spot, their best chance at making the postseason. He's been the better goaltender, and he's one of the better goaltenders on the market right now. And then your boy, Lucas Dostel, he is rostered on Yahoo at 37%, also 37% on ESPN. And for him, he's just making the best of a bad situation in Anaheim. They're going through rebuild. They're struggling offensively. They struggle on special teams. Right now, the lone bright spot is in between the pipes with Lucas Dostel. You know, John Gibson is on the trade bait board. A lot of these players we're going to talk about are on that board as well. But Dostel has been very good over the last couple of seasons. This year, .911 save percentage, 2.86 goals against average. He's got a 15-13-4 record. And at 24 years old, the future is bright for this young netminder in Anaheim. If that franchise can start figuring things out with Trevor Zegras, Troy Terry, Leo Carlson, get them going offensively, turn the ship around offensively. Right now, in between the pipes, Dostel has been rock solid.
Down the stretch, it's time to get creative. Thank you for highlighting my boy. I appreciate you. The Anaheim Ducks, right there in the middle in terms of strength of schedule, you know, literally a mixed bag of opponents down the stretch. So you're going to have to handle it just as, with as much of an angle and a finger on the pulse as we've been seeing for weeks now. Dostal, the Ducks, showing flashes of brilliance, but then also showing what they really are, I think, Steele, as a club that's sitting 6th right now in that wild card race, 54 points, 7 points back of the Vancouver Canucks. I think that actually means they might actually play some good hockey down the stretch as well. So thank you for bringing up Lucas Dostel. I think in a similar vein, Protas. Alexei Protas has been a player that I know I have brought up at least 4 or 5 different times. And with him playing with PLD and Connor McMichael and that line really sticking. And how about this? The Washington Capitals, over their last 10 games heading into the stretch, 6-1-3. You and I throw out the term getting a piece of the teams that we like to see. The Washington Capitals, given how stingy they've been defensively, has got to be one. This is a really good season from a player steal that headed into this season was under 200 games played in the NHL. 22 goals, 24 assists, playing with PLD and McMichael. Washington down the stretch, because I'm going to continue to say it. You're going to hear it from me. They're top 5 in ease of schedule. I want a piece of the Washington Capitals with Protas, with all the underlying numbers and what we've seen from him so far. This is also a player steal. I wanted to bring this up to you. That was a late 3rd round pick. No one has paid attention to him except perhaps you and I and some other dedicated fantasy heads. I love Protas. I want a piece of him down the stretch. Caps, all of it looking good. That's a player that's catching my attention once again.
He's a name to circle for next year. I still think a lot of people are going to forget about him going into the 2025-26 season and let him fade significantly. And I don't think by any means he's, an 8th, 9th, 10th round player, but you could definitely snack him maybe in that 13th, 14th, 15th round if you want to fade him just a little bit. But he's had a fantastic season. Part of the reason why the Washington Capitals are in 1st in the Metropolitan this year.
If you don't mind, sorry to jump in, please
go ahead.
Continue. You go.
No,
that's my bad.
What I'm saying is basically the Washington Capitals players, all the acquisitions they made along with some of the guys they just brought up from the farm team have turned this franchise around after a very after a very abysmal postseason, getting swept by the Rangers.
Yes.
What the future was looking like for the Alexander Ovechkin. They've given purpose and style to his game once again. And by no means do I think Ovechkin is going to hang them up anytime soon.
66% on Fantrax, my bad, Steele. 50 on Yahoo, 46 on ESPN. They also have the Pens, then the Oil back-to-back, St. Louis, Calgary, and Tampa, followed by that in terms of the schedule. So that's my bad. I meant to get that off. I think that's actually very favorable for this Washington Capitals club, at least on that week-to-week basis. So over to you. Who else are you looking at? I got a whole bunch of other players. I got honorable mentions, no bets, but we've got all of these targets that you should really be considering. Who else are you looking at, my friend? And apologies for cutting you off.
All good, all love, brother. I did want to say for Karel Vejmelka and Utah Hockey Club, they also have one of the best remaining schedules of the season, 6th best in that case. Real quickly before we get to break and we finish off with the rest of our players, I'm not going to go in depth on this player because he's most likely not available out there. But Matthew Knies has to be talked about. 53% on Yahoo, 64% on ESPN. A guy who plays in the top 6 of one of the best franchises, best teams, best hockey players in the game right now. You all know who they are. Matthews, Nylander, Marner, Tavares. Doesn't matter. He's playing with them. The Toronto Maple Leafs have the easiest schedule remaining of the season. They have the best schedule remaining. That's why I wanted to mention Matthew Knies, because if he is out there, which in most cases he is not, but if he is, one of the easiest schedules, playing with the best players in the best franchise in the National Hockey League.
Man, you know what? This is why I like doing this show with you, because I have right here honorable mention. I'll get my honorable mentions out of the way quick, too. Will Smith on the San Jose Sharks, good young player, putting up some points, minutes reduced. I like it. Vlad Nemesnikov, also like it. He's getting some honorable mention for another player I'll talk about. Holy Matty Knies. Yes, sir. Must add. How is it, Steele, that at 62% on ESPN and 50% on Yahoo, he's playing with Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews? And also, I don't know if you've seen this, the ice time way up, 23 minutes, 20 minutes, 18 and a half minutes. Get a piece of it. if it's possible. Had to be mentioned. Thank you so much for bringing it up. This is why we do this together, brother. That's making up for all my cut shorts of you earlier. But don't worry, Steele and I will be bringing all the fantasy fire, more waiver wire targets up around the break, 4 nations face-off coverage, everything that you need to stack that hockey paper. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Select Quote. Sports, they have a winning strategy. It's everything. How the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, World Series, and Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy with Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. Select Quote makes it easy to find the perfect insurance policy as one of America's leading insurance brokers for over 40 years of experience. Get the right life insurance for you at selectquote.com today /LockedOnNHL. Go to selectquote.com /LockedOnNHL today to get started. That is selectquote.com /LockedOnNHL. I don't know if you heard it, Steele, but you know what the acronym is. Select Quote. They shop, you save. Tap in today.
That's it. Select Quote. There we go. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen. Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. Please, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Share with your friends and family out there. It means the world to Flip and I. That's why we do what we do, especially with these episodes, waiver wire targets.
Yep.
You and I were just talking about Zach Werenski, what he's been doing with Team USA on yesterday's episode. If you haven't checked it out, you check it out on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform.
Yes,
but we talked about his D-mate in Columbus, Ivan Provorov, who's also on the trade bait board, who could be moved off or traded at the deadline to a legitimate contender if the Blue Jackets start to fall out of the race. And this is a guy before the break has shown, a very significant step up in his game offensively.
Sure.
When you look at the last 4 games, he was getting over 28 minutes straight in 4+ games. And I know, a couple of them were one goal games going into overtime. Nonetheless, he was playing almost 30 minutes for the last 4. Absolutely insane. He has 4 points in his last 5 games, 6 goals, 25 shots. He's been very decent in his own zone as well as in the offensive zone of late. Peripheral wise, you get a lot of blocks from this player, a couple of hits. Shots on goal, it varies season to season. Right now, it's very low, 67 shots in 56 games. But the fact that he's on the trade bait board could be moved to a legitimate contender. He's rostered at 12% on Yahoo, 26% on ESPN. And the Columbus Blue Jackets, unfortunately, they do have one of the hardest remaining schedules in the season, 5th worst schedule or 5th toughest schedule remaining. So that's a little bit of a negative, a con in that column for Provorov. But nonetheless, when you look at this player and what he's done in the roster percentage right now, he's available out there. If you need some help on the blue line, I think he's a good fill-in.
Ivan Provorov is also a former 7th overall draft pick, a guy that you and I had to discuss. Not every single piece that have boosted their value in this Big Four Nations face-off tournament are going to be available. Provorov on the trade bait board, Provorov playing with Werenski, and also even with their tough schedule, Steele, you and I have covered at length how we feel about this Columbus Blue Jackets club, especially when it comes to goals for. They have scored the 4th most goals in the Eastern Conference this year. So with Ivan Provorov kind of being dangled out there, and he gets a current great situation with Werenski, even with that tough schedule, thank you so much for highlighting him. He has to be mentioned. Similar with Matthew Knies, just in terms of you might have to add and get away or wait for the perfect time. I just think it needs to be highlighted. So I got 2 more players to discuss. One of them, I think we can keep it short, considering we both talked about him, and I have at length, Cole Perfetti. Putting up numbers finally, really getting a good look on that second line with Nemesnikov. We brought that up as well. So I'm going to keep this one really short and sweet. Cole Perfetti, 62% on Fantrax, 28 on Yahoo, 25 on ESPN before the break, 6 points in 5 games. But take this in, and this is my favorite angle with Perfetti. Sharks, St. Louis, Ottawa, Nashville, Philly, and the New York Islanders for the next 6 opponents for the Winnipeg Jets. Steele, I think just like we've been throwing out on multiple angles over the last few waiver wire shows, the Jets are a piece that you want of, regardless of what it is, because those big guns are going to be so well owned. So Nemesnikov, Perfetti, the Jets, that's the angle that I think you start maximizing on these, Steele. You might not win, but you're going to put your team in the best position to do just that.
Well, I'm so glad you went straight to the Winnipeg Jets, and getting a
Boom.
piece of them is exactly what I want as
Thank
well.
you, sir.
And I have a piece of them with my player, Nino Niederreiter. I think this guy just goes about his business, does his job. He's not going to jump off the page offensively. He's been a perennial 35 to 45, 50 on a high end if he has a really good season, but perennial 35 to 45 point player. He's been around the league for 14, 15 years now. He's been on 5 or 6 different teams. He's been with the Winnipeg Jets the last 3 seasons now. And I honestly think he's found himself a really good home. And 29 points in 56 games, 110 shots, 104 hits, and 31 blocks. Penalty minutes has 18. He's a plus 16. He's on the penalty kill unit. He's on the power play unit. He's just a utility belt. He's a Swiss Army knife. He really just does it all. Like I said, not going to jump off the page offensively, but he fills out everything. And that's what I love about
Army knife. Look at you go.
He's a Swiss Army knife. You throw him in there, he's going to do his job. 23% rostered on Yahoo, 34% on ESPN. I have him in a few different leagues. He's helped me get to a place where I'm at to fill those peripherals. I have him on my one fantasy hockey team. I'm in the playoffs currently with him right now. And the other one, I'm top 5 in the league. So these are just some of the players that you fill towards the end of the draft, or you pick up early on the waiver wire, and they just start to fill out. They start to have a really good season. They end up being one that you keep for a couple of months or a long time.
First and foremost, thank goodness that you're doing well in both of our listener leagues to give the show a little bit of credibility because, you and I all talk about it, but
the kid, baby, it's all the kid.
Shout out to you 100%. I got to give you that love, give you your flowers. That's what we're about on this pod, but also Nino Niederreiter, Swiss and Army knife. Boom. Also take in the Winnipeg Jets, most goals for this year, least goals against, and by far the best goal differential at plus 68. If this team can piece together what they've done in the regular season, they will be very hard to stop in the postseason. But
championship or bust.
It comes down to what you and I have also said the last couple of seasons. Has Connor Hellebuck seen too much rubber? Has he been run out there too much? He's run out of steam the last couple of years, Steele. And in the NHL, the season starts again in late April. So we'll talk a lot about it. I got a few more players to get to right after the break. Take us there if you're ready, brother, and we'll be back the rest of the week covering everything that you guys need to know.
Everything you need to know. Make sure you share with your friends and family out there. Flip and I really do appreciate it. When we come back from break, more waiver wire must adds for this next week. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get it on than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action all night long. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you so much for tuning in for Tuesday's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod. You're with your boy Flip Livingstone and Steele Roten, getting after it 5 days a week. Once again, please make sure you hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review, share with your friends and family out there. Flip and I really do appreciate all the love and support we receive on the show, on YouTube, on your favorite podcast platform. So thank you so much for that. Flip, over to you, my friend. We've thrown out a lot of names out there. Must adds for this upcoming week, heading into the playoffs. Who are your last few guys that you're looking at?
So 8 points in 4 games headed into the break for Ryan Donato, playing on a line with Connor Bedard. to me, warrants attention in a very big way. On Yahoo, 25%, 15 on ESPN. The Chicago Blackhawks, though, have the Columbus Blue Jackets. They have Toronto on a back-to-back, Utah, Anaheim, and a very decent schedule. So with Ryan Donato's hot streak, with Connor Bedard's confidence growing, there's a very good situation to pounce on. That's all that needs to be said. And lastly, Steele, a player that I think has been brought up at length, and yeah, I got the old notepad out. That's how you know the old boys roll. Bowen Byram's name has been thrown out there a lot. First of all, he's playing on the top pairing with Rasmus Dahlin. I think that needs to be taken in. 5 points in his last 3 games headed into the break, 24 on ESPN, 30 on Yahoo. The minutes way up, and if this is a piece that the Buffalo Sabres are dangling, and he's playing with confidence with Dahlin, I definitely am taking a shot on Bowen Byram over the next couple of weeks. That seems to me like an obvious angle, even if the Sabres are up and down. Bowen Byram, you and I both like him. If he's on the move, he'll be eating even more minutes, and he's feeling confident. I like it. Offensive blue line boost, got to mention it, along with Ryan Donato.
I really like Bowen Byram as well. And, it's funny. I'm seeing a lot online right now on social media that both the Buffalo Sabres and the Colorado Avalanche have not liked the way the Casey Middlestat Bowen Byram deal has turned out, has shaped out. And again, that's why we're seeing both them on the trade bait board. I think Bowen Byram's closer to the bottom of the board, but regardless, both franchises not happy with it. I'm also with you on Ryan Donato. Before the break happened, he was popping off. He had 8 points in his last 4 games. He's got a career high 37 points and 53 so far. When you're playing with Connor Bedard, that's going to happen for you. Your stock, your value, it's going to drive up. 124 shots, 89 hits. I like the physical aspect he brings to the game for a smaller player. 5'11", 6 feet, 190 pounds. He can really bring the boom out there when he wants to protect his superstar. Ryan Donato, another player that's on the trade bait board. Actually, I believe in the top 5. A lot of teams are very interested in what he brings
Makes sense.
to the game value-wise. I think he is a good player to add moving forward in your fantasy hockey leagues. My last player, talked about him a few times throughout the season.
Let's go.
Kind of been a weird situation in Seattle, but Shane Wright is a player to keep an eye on for. 21 years old, 31 points in 54 games. He's got 12 goals, 19 assists. Peripheral wise, again, he's still very young, still finding his footing, his game at the big stage in the National Hockey League. Only 56 shots, 39 blocks, 41 hits. That will elevate as he grows, as he develops, as he learns the system in Seattle. Sure. There's a lot to like about what he's doing right now for potentially keep him being a keeper in the near future. So Shane Wright, 31 points in 54 games. He has 6 points in his last 5 games before the break happened. So wanted to throw him out there. He's obviously available. I believe he's rostered at 7% in both Yahoo and ESPN. So Seattle, just looking at where they are, looking what they have for the remaining schedule, they do have one of the toughest schedules remaining, second toughest in the National Hockey League. But when you have guys who show a lot of promise in Shane Wright, I got to throw his name out there.
That's definitely a deeper cut. We've mentioned that angle. The Seattle Kraken sit 5th in Western Conference goal scoring. They have at times shown flashes of something that I will pay attention to. You know how I feel about this club. I'm not buying into them. Very average. However, I do like the deployment right now, and I think that's something that you and I have kind of covered with Shane Wright, Jared McCann, Burakovsky right now on that third line. Down the stretch, the schedule is what it is. He's also getting deployment on a second power play unit with Bjorkstrand, Stevenson, and Brandon Montour if he's healthy. The Seattle Kraken, to me, still really just so average. So many question marks at key parts of this roster and just on the outside looking in the Western Conference. However, Shane Wright might be one of those angles when it comes to keeper dynasty that if you're kind of running out of spots, but you want a really high risk, high reward, that might be the fitting that I'm looking at this kid, because next season, a little shuffle of the lineup, perhaps, then I'm kind of very much paying attention to him. Look, Lots of very tricky spots here, I would say, for fantasy and for betting. With the March trade deadline approaching, this break for Four Nations, players being on vacations, partying on boats, but then also in intense hockey games, this is going to be hard to handicap, Steele. But guess what? You and I will be here Monday through Friday, 30 minutes in and out, baby. Bets at the end of every show. Doesn't matter how nitty and gritty it gets. Me and Mr. Roden here to cover it all for y'all.
On the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod, like Flip said, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday is when you can find our episodes, 7 o'clock in the morning. For your second listen, make sure you check out the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On NHL podcast network, your team every single day. From Flip and myself, good luck with your bets. Good luck with your weekly matchups. This weekend is going to be crucial. It's a 2-week matchup. Remember that, and we shall see you back here again for tomorrow's episode.